And we're live, guys. Welcome to another live stream from the Three Girls in Love channel. My name is Joseph Darling. Today we are talking about this new video that has come from the School of Life. How romantic attachment works. And I'm kind of intrigued. I haven't watched the video at all yet. It was posted yesterday. And let's see what we can get out of it. But let's first speed up the process a bit. I recommend that you do that on my videos as well. You just go back to playback speed and go to 125, 1.5. You know, when I listen to myself on 2. So that's up to you guys. But anyway, I'm going to watch it on 125 and let's watch it.
This is a film about the science of attachment. More precisely, a film about geese, jackdaws, a scientist called Konrad Lorenz, and your love life. Konrad Lorenz, who was born in 1903 and died in 1989, was an Austrian ornithologist and zoologist who spent most of his adult life in marshes and wetlands studying the behavior of grey-lag geese and jackdaws.
First of all, I just want to briefly explain something here. When it comes to, I think it's very interesting when people begin to talk about love and romance between animals and then putting that over to humans. Like, we are a different species. Okay, like, just because it works in the animal kingdom doesn't mean that what they're doing out there is what we necessarily should be doing. Does that make sense? Because they've evolved in their way and we've evolved in our way. And to be honest with you, I'd rather be a human than an animal. So we've got to see what can we do to progress the human race as humans, okay? Instead of looking back to, if we were animals in the past, okay, that's evolutionary theory. I don't necessarily believe in that. But if that's kind of the frame people are using, like we've gone from animals to become humans. And if that's the case, then why would we want to return back to being animals? If that makes sense. So just take the information that you hear here with a grain of salt, because we're gonna relate animals to humans, if that makes sense.
What particularly interested him was how these birds seemed to develop an attachment to their mother from within a few minutes of their birth, following dutifully behind her and obeying her guidance in matters of sheltering and feeding. His observations led him to develop what is known as the principle of imprinting, a theory.
The principles of imprinting. Okay, well, all right.
About the way in which nidifugus birds, that is, birds that leave their nests just after hatching, grow to develop an instinctive and rapid bond with maternal figures. But what Lorenz discovered in his research was that, contrary to centuries of thinking, birds like grey-lag geese and jackdaws do not necessarily develop an attachment to their real mother. They develop an attachment to the first moving object that they lay eyes on within hours of hatching. They aren't able to discriminate in any sophisticated way about who they form an attachment to. It might be a kindly maternal bird, but it could also be an indifferent farmer or a random piece of agricultural machinery. Rather cruelly but illuminatingly, Lorenz showed that a young bird can, depending on the experiment, develop an extremely powerful attachment to a scientist in Wellington boots, a bicycle, a tyre, a garden hose, or a mannequin. Lorenz's most famous book, The Companion in the Environment of Birds, published in 1930.
Environment. Interesting. Like, do you see how this really has nothing to do with romantic attachment yet? Like, this is ridiculous. What are they confusing you with this channel? Like, I mean, School of Life has usually amazing videos. Go check them out. Subscribe to their channel. But whoever picked this video to explain romantic attachment is ridiculous. Like, this is, like, what are we gonna get from this? I'm very intrigued.
1955 talked exclusively of winged creatures, but it was seized upon by psychologists reflecting on human behaviour and used to shed light on a particularly painful phenomenon of our love lives, our tendency to seek out and trot obediently behind other humans who may not, all things considered, be in any substantial way fitting or appropriate for us. just like
Okay, so now we're beginning to evolve towards humans. Thank you, School of Life. Um, why? I can explain the psychology of why we want that's things that are very often bad for us, and especially in terms of femininity. Okay, because that is the thing that's so confusing to people is the female nature of why do women like bad guys. That's a huge thing, and I hope maybe they're going to shed some light on it on this video, but I have my own huge opinions on that, so let's keep going.
young birds, young humans develop powerful attachments to the adults who are closest to them in their early years. Yet, also rather like birds, they are unable to discriminate very well between caregivers. They latch on to who is around, not what their deeper nature would ideally call for. They can, at the most extreme, develop attachments to people who don't deserve their love at all, who are, as it were, as relevant to their needs as a bicycle is to a goose.
This is ridiculous. Like, there is an inherent desire to know and understand who your parents are. An inherent need in children. You understand that when you begin to look at adoptive kids who become itchy about where their origins come from. Like, once they get of a certain age and they figure out that they've been adopted, they're like, I need to figure out who my parents are. I need to figure out who my mother is. I need to figure out who my dad is. And they begin this venture of looking for their adoptive mothers and fathers. Like, this is a recurring theme in adoptive children. So to state that something is imprinted in us the moment we are born, and that person is who we are latched onto for life, like, maybe, but I think it's more a transaction done consistently over a long period of time. Like, we bond with those that we have transactions with, okay? And the more intense the emotional transaction is, the more connected we're going to be with that person. However, if we have many emotional moments with an individual continuously and consistently over a long period of time, we're going to develop more attachment and bond and depth with that person. So this is really what's going on. It's not really, oh, the first person we see when we wake up and suddenly we're in love for the rest of our lives. It's more that we are shown love and appreciation and adoration consistently on a continual basis over a long period of time. That's really what creates depth, in my opinion. So far, this video is completely way off.
An infant might not actually become attached to a tyre, but they might, in a comparable process, grow powerfully impressed by someone who neglects them emotionally, who belittles them, who makes them feel ashamed and visits considerable cruelty upon them.
Okay. This is... Okay, so basically they're saying that parents very often have a negative effect on children by the way that they criticize, belittle them, and make them feel inferior. And that's true, parents do that. However, these parents also have shown a lot of love and appreciation and and been there consistently over a long period of time for these kids, which means that it hurts more when the people that love us the most are the ones that hurt us. Like for example, if a stranger offends my child, it won't hurt as much as if me, as their father, offends them and offends them in a bad way, if that makes sense. I mean, of course, it's comparable depending upon what is done, like how awful was the offense, etc., etc. But do you understand what I mean? Like, it's the people that are closest to you that have the power to make you feel very inferior if they treat you horribly. So yeah, I mean, that makes sense, of course.
Far worse, this early imprinting then has the power to govern the sort of lovers who these people, once they're grown, find themselves growing attached to in turn. with some of the same sort of almost laughable impressionability evinced by baby jackdaws trotting behind a scientist in a lab coat.
Why were they, like, why did they use two guys? Like, they're talking about romantic attachment. Like, the majority of time, 95% of the time, or 90% of the time, we're talking in terms of two genders. Two genders, opposite genders, are interested in each other and are attached. I don't know what they're trying to promote with this video, with two homosexuals, but nothing wrong with homosexuals. It's just kind of strange. It's a minority, but hey, okay.
A human who's been imprinted with unhelpful ideas about who should give them care and nurture may spend decades devoting themselves to the most inappropriate and callous figures. It seems, via Lawrence's work, that our biological makeup privileges attachment to anyone over attachment to someone able to fulfill our needs. We are sometimes puzzled by how frequently we find ourselves in love with people whom we know at a rational level are not going to be too good for us, but who mirror the disturbing patterns of our attachments from early childhood. The process may seem deeply dispiriting, but Lawrence's work opens up an avenue of compassion. We may be a great deal more sophisticated than birds in our mental processes, but when it comes to whom we are drawn to, we're prey to some of the same mechanical illogicality as they. It can take years and a lot of work to realize that we are imprinted to follow fools and ingrates. When we trot without question behind a person who treats us coldly or plays with our mind, we shouldn't merely hate ourselves. We should reflect on how much this unfulfilling adult mirrors an early attachment figure who indirectly mocked who we were before we had a chance to understand ourselves and what we deserved. It is no insult to recognize that we are sometimes, in intimate areas of our lives, as helpless before the workings of imprinting as a goose. And yet, as always, it is by realizing our servitude that we have a chance to break free from it. We are not compelled to follow incessantly behind someone unworthy of our love. We are, as young birds are not, free to take off and seek out someone better able to deliver, in an adult form, the generous and life-enhancing love that we should have known from the first.
So, okay, where do we start? So this video, yes, I mean, there should be probably some primal instincts of some sort that causes us to desire in our partner what we've had as a child. I mean, yes, probably there's something to it in terms of, let's say we've had our parents were absolutely loving towards us, they were consistent in their care towards us, and because they were also sometimes mean to us and sometimes, made us feel inferior and all that stuff, we want someone who does that as well. Like, so it's a combination. So it's almost as if we're used to someone, showing us love, but then also showing us the opposite and being difficult with us. And that becomes what we want to find later in life. Bro, this is confusing. This is completely confusing and doesn't explain love really the way that it should be explained. Okay? If we're gonna explain the romantic attachment, I would never use geese. I would never use animals to explain this, to be honest with you. I would use masculinity and femininity. That's the whole case in point. Let's go back to... hold on a second. Let's do this instead. Okay, so let's talk about masculinity and femininity, because in my opinion, that's really where it's at. Femininity and masculinity is about understanding masculinity and femininity in the sense of men are attracted in general to femininity. That's imprinted in us from the universe. That is not that's like part of our design. Men are desirous for feminine creatures. The more they're feminine themselves, the more they're going to be attracted to both genders. Okay? And the more they go towards that feminine side, they don't really feel any attraction or that it works with women, the more that they're going to go towards men, because they're attracted to them. It's kind of like, the more feminine they are, the more vulnerable they are, the more they're going to find someone like them who also is attracted to men, but who are more masculine than they are. So you've got the butch one in a homosexual relationship, and then you've got the more feminine one. But that's explaining minorities, okay? Let's not talk about minorities as much because we've got to generalize, okay? I think it's important that we generalize in order for us to understand how things work. Once we begin to go into the minority stuff, it begins to become very difficult and confusing. And it's not for amateurs to understand how that romantic attachment happens. But how can we understand regular, the normal majority of people? You've got femininity, you've got masculinity. Men were designed to be interested in feminine creatures. And they were designed because of their puberty, they begin to develop automatically masculine features, like a deeper voice, like more broad shoulders than women, a bigger bone density. Like there's a lot of things that men go through throughout their teenage years that helps them to become a man. These are the exact things that women desire in a mate. Women, okay, they're designed to desire masculine creatures. Masculine creatures in the sense people or a man, one man who is desirous and able, not just desirous, but someone who's able, who has the power to protect and to provide. That's feminine creatures in general. However, things are getting very warped these days in terms of women becoming more and more masculine. Now, they've been this throughout ages, okay? What has been going on for the last thousands of years, because the human society was very poor, there was a lot of problems, a lot of burdens, a lot of death, a lot of injury, bacteria, sickness, all that stuff, and people had like an average length of life was like, lifespan was like 30 years and stuff like that. It's ridiculous how horrific the past of human societies were. And during that time frame, we know that women were massively burdened by this, meaning massively masculine. However, men were also forced to be masculine in the sense that they developed masculine features, but they weren't really necessarily forced by nature to learn how to control their emotions. There were men who did learn how to control their emotions, and this is really, truly the defining feature of a masculine man. Someone who is emotionally stable, someone who's emotionally consistent, someone that a woman can trust, and a man also has the ability to trust because this guy, he is consistent. I can rely on this. Really, masculinity is all about trust when you think about it. If you cannot trust the person, then you're not going to be attracted to him. What's interesting, how can you say that, Joseph? Because very often women join men that they do not trust from a standpoint of providing for them and protecting them. It's kind of like they're attracted to guys who are not really good father figures. Well, listen to this. Women have emotional logic when it comes to who they're attracted to. So it's not rational when they figure out who they're attracted to. What actually ends up happening very often is that they begin to be attracted to someone who their emotions trust, not who they trust up here. Attraction for women is completely emotional. If she doesn't feel it for someone, she doesn't feel it. Right? So it's all about the emotion. It's all about feelings when it comes to attraction for women. So the romantic attachment that happens really is a woman feels trust down here. And the trust is whether he is capable of protecting and providing for her from a primitive time frame. Okay? So if in 5,000 years ago or whatever it is, she sees this guy, now in 2020, that guy would have been able to provide and protect for me back then. Because he doesn't care about anyone. He's strong. He has masculine features in the sense that he's able, he's got power. That's really what women are attracted to. If a man has confidence and power, she will be attracted. That's how women have been designed from the get-go. And when we know this, this is how romantic attachment happens. So women begin to trust this guy, and if he shows any interest in her back, this solidifies the romantic attachment because it creates hope. So women actually trust this person emotionally, even though he might be a very, very, very bad guy. But they trust him. Do you see that aspect? It's kind of like the trust is there, not there, but the trust happens emotionally with her heart that this guy could provide and protect for me if everything was absolutely horrific with society. Does that make sense? So the moment he comes in and says, hey, how are you doing? Blah, 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 blah. She becomes like, oh, wow, he's interested in me and this is exciting and blah, blah, blah. So it's all based upon really him being a leader in a sense of power. But if she could choose, she would want someone who has the ability to kick ass, right? Yes, but she would want someone who's also nice to her, who also wants to give her the world, who also wants to do this, that, and the other for her, as long as she does not become his focus. She wants to join a man who has purpose beyond her. Someone who is basically thinking big, who has massive ambitions, and is going in a certain direction, and who doesn't need her necessarily. She wants him to desire him, to desire her, right? She wants to be desired by her man of high value, but the romantic attachment is simply based on, come and take my hand, I'll take you along because, you know, I desire you, but that's it. Like, I want to connect with you, we have an amazing connection, but I have a purpose and I'm going in this direction, will you come with me? That's what women want. Like, they want a knight in shining armor to swoop them off their feet and bring them along on his journey. Okay? The more feminine they are. But the more masculine women become, the more this becomes confusing, because she begins to develop hormones in her system that are based on her being attracted to estrogen. Okay? And being attracted to someone who fulfills the other needs of life. Like, in the beginning of her life, in her teenage years, pretty much all women are attracted to bad boys, or the bad boys that they can get. Or guys who have confidence. Guess who have confidence in high school? It's bad boys. Okay, like the nice guys, they're like, oh, do. Unless they're like very boisterous and loud and basically, it's insane. But if someone is interested in them who basically has confidence, they'll be interested back. When they're feminine, they'll try to get the best guy possible in terms of confidence. And that's kind of consistent, I've noticed, more than 80% of the time. And then they grow up, and then they've had heartbreaks, they've had burdens with their parents, they've got to figure out provision and how to protect themselves, because that's the feminist stuff going on these days. And then she moves on throughout her life and becomes more and more and more and more and more burdened from very often the having multiple sexual partners. Okay, the more she increases her partner count, the more masculine she's going to become. And the more masculine she is, the more emotionally inconsistent in terms of, bad emotional inconsistent. Like, we want women to have emotional inconsistency in terms of, them having their reproductive cycle, them venting their emotions and getting it out and all that stuff, and preferably, if we could manage to create the right environment as men, we'd be able to only see women be giggly and excited and all over the place. Amazing. We love that. However, the more masculine she becomes, the more she becomes emotionally consistent, like in a very bad way, because she's tried to control herself so much that she basically explodes in front of other people when she'd rather not explode. So it's kind of like, the more masculine women become, the more problematic the world becomes. The more we begin to see rioting, the more we begin to see intense sexuality and pornographic images and all this and that and the other, because women begin to adopt a masculine frame of mind, because of that's what their emotions are telling them that they need. And when they enter into that space, they feel now fulfilled short term, because, oh yes, finally I can express who I really am, which is the masculine emotions that they have inside. And when they express those emotions, then they feel good, but it's going to be temporary. And they're always going to run back towards their femininity. They're never going to be 100% masculine. It's impossible. They're going to run back to their feminine ways of feeling, in a sense, because the more masculine they become, the less they're able to feel. The less they feel anything. They feel dead inside. The more masculine they become. So what happens? Well, they begin to return to stimulants very often. If they don't manage to return to femininity, natural femininity, which will require a lot of discipline in order to get back to. But that's what we recommend on this channel, is like, if you're very masculine, let's figure out what we can do to help you let go and surrender to who you truly are. The body, your body is designed to heal you and allow you to go back to your feminine state if you simply allow yourself to. But very often, as a masculine woman, you still need a masculine man. You need a polar opposite in order for you to be able to let go and to surrender and to relax, if that makes sense. So I hope you got something out of this video. I'm a little bit all over the place, but to be honest, it's kind of because of the confusion that came from the video in the beginning. It's like romantic attachment and who you see first when you open your eyes when you're born. Like, what on earth does that have to do with romantic attachment? Like, masculinity, femininity. That's what the video should have been about. And that women are attracted to masculinity if they're feminine. When they're in their teenage years, they're attracted to masculinity unless they're extremely masculine themselves. And if they are, then they'll be interested in femininity because they're the best men that they can get who are interested in them. But very often, women are interested in that which is opposite to them. Okay? And the more masculine a woman is, the more feminine a man is, which means that the less in control of his emotions he is. Which means that whenever something wrong happens in the relationship, the more he's going to blow up and be angry and upset, which is not masculine. It's feminine to be emotionally inconsistent. Okay, so if you're masculine and someone treats you bad, that's why. That's what's going on. It's because he can't control his emotions. A masculine man is able to control his emotions always, all the time. And that's how you can measure whether a man is masculine or not, as if he's emotionally consistent, always stable, no matter what, an attitude independent of circumstances. That's a masculine man. So if you're able to attract a man who is emotionally completely consistent, and he shows power and confidence in his life, and he also is trustworthy and honorable and has integrity, and does what he says he's going to do, and you can trust him, then you can know that he's massively progressed on his masculinity trail, which means that you can measure your femininity by the kind of men that you're able to attract that way, if that makes sense. So, hope you got something out of this video. I'm fired up outside my brain about sharing these things with you on this 3 Girls in Love channel. My name is Joseph Darling, and unless there's any comments, which there aren't today, I'll see you in the next one.